Taurus, I need you to sit with me for this reading because what I'm seeing in these cards is nothing short of extraordinary. This is a general reading for entertainment purposes, so take what resonates and leave what doesn't, but the energy coming through right now is incredibly strong and specific. We're talking about someone in your life who played the role of the righteous one, the moral authority, the person who pointed fingers at every perceived flaw in your character while conveniently ignoring their own shadow. This person made you question yourself, made you feel like you were the problem, like you were the one who needed fixing. They cursed your name, spoke poison about you to others, and created a narrative where they were the victim and you were the villain. But Taurus, what I'm picking up in these cards is that the universe has been watching, has been taking notes, and divine timing is a real thing. This reading is about the karmic rebalancing happening right now, not in some distant future, but in the present moment. What's most striking is that this punishment, this correction, is happening within the very walls they call home, in the space they thought was their sanctuary. When I shuffled these cards asking about the energy surrounding this hypocritical person and the justice you've been waiting to see, the cards practically flew out of the deck. The story they're telling is clear and powerful. This isn't about you seeking revenge or wishing harm on anyone. This is about the natural law of cause and effect, about energy returning to its source, about someone finally facing the mirror they've been avoiding for so long. What they put you through, the hell they created for you, the way they systematically tried to break you down while presenting themselves as somehow superior or more evolved, all of that energy is now circling back to them in ways they never anticipated. The fascinating thing about karma is that it doesn't just punish, it educates, it forces growth, and sometimes that education happens in the most uncomfortable, unavoidable ways. This person's home, their personal life, their private world is becoming the classroom where they're learning lessons they refused to learn when they had gentler opportunities. I pulled 10 cards for you today, and I'm interpreting the energy I see based on the questions and intentions I held during the shuffle. Remember, this isn't meant to replace professional advice of any kind. What I'm picking up is a story of exposure, consequences, and divine justice that's both swift and thorough. The first card that came forward is the King of Swords, and when I pulled this card, I immediately felt this cold, intellectual energy, the kind that cuts without emotion, that judges without mercy. This card is showing me exactly who this person has been in your life. The King of Swords sits on his throne with absolute certainty in his judgments, his sword raised and ready to cut through anything he deems unworthy. The butterflies carved into his throne represent transformation, but notice how they're frozen in stone, unable to actually transform, because this king has become rigid in his thinking. The barren trees in the background tell me everything about what it's like to be in relationship with this energy. Nothing grows, nothing flourishes, because the atmosphere is too harsh, too judgmental, too cold. This card reveals the core nature of who you've been dealing with. This person positioned themselves as the ultimate authority on right and wrong, as someone whose intellect and moral clarity gave them permission to dissect your life, your choices, your very being. They used their words like surgical instruments, precisely cutting into your vulnerabilities, exposing your wounds not to heal them, but to prove their superiority. The King of Swords in this position shows someone who weaponized communication, who took pride in their ability to articulate your flaws while remaining blind to their own. They created elaborate arguments for why you were the problem, built logical frameworks that justified their treatment of you, and convinced themselves and possibly others that their cruelty was actually clarity, that their judgment was actually wisdom. In your real life, this manifested as someone who could make you feel small with just a few carefully chosen words. They had this way of presenting their criticisms as observations, their attacks as concern, their manipulation as guidance. Maybe they were the person who could turn any conversation into an analysis of what you were doing wrong, who could take your joy and find the flaw in it, Who could make you second-guess every decision by pointing out potential pitfalls with such confidence that you started to believe they could see something you couldn't. They lived in their head, in their judgments, and they expected you to live there too, constantly measuring yourself against their impossible standards. The emotional landscape this reveals is one of constant evaluation and criticism. For you, being in relationship with this energy meant never feeling safe to just be, never feeling accepted as you are, always sensing that you were being measured and found wanting. This person used intellectual superiority as a defense against their own emotional inadequacy, judging others harshly because they couldn't face their own shadow. They made you their project, their case study, the evidence they used to prove their own righteousness. But here's what the universe is making clear through this King of Swords showing up first. This energy that they used against you is now turned inward. The very qualities that made them so effective at tormenting you are now the instruments of their own suffering. That analytical mind that picked apart your every move is now analyzing their own life and finding it lacking. That critical voice they directed at you is now echoing in their own head, pointing out their failures, their hypocrisies, their shortcomings. The sword they wielded so freely against you is now cutting into their own sense of self. Moving into the next card, I pulled Justice and Taurus. When this card appeared right after the King of Swords, I felt this immediate sense of relief, of rightness, of the universe saying, yes, we see what happened, and yes, balance is being restored. Justice sits enthroned between two pillars, holding a sword in her right hand and scales in her left, representing the perfect balance of thought and intuition, of consequence and fairness. The purple cloak she wears speaks to spiritual wisdom, to the understanding that true justice operates on levels beyond human vengeance. The crown with the small square represents clarity of thought and the firm decisions that come from universal law rather than personal bias. What I'm picking up from this Justice card is that what's happening to this person isn't random misfortune, isn't coincidental suffering, it's the direct result of actions taken, words spoken, harm caused. The scales of justice are rebalancing with mathematical precision. Every lie they told about you, every moment they made you doubt yourself, every time they positioned themselves as righteous while behaving cruelly, all of it is being weighed on those scales. The sword Justice holds is the same as the King of Swords carries, but the difference is crucial. In the hands of Justice, the sword cuts through illusion to reveal truth. It severs karma. It brings clarity. In the hands of that hypocritical person, the sword was used to wound and control. From what I'm interpreting, this card is telling you that the universe has been keeping accounts, has been documenting everything that transpired between you and this person. The cosmic courtroom has reviewed the evidence, and judgment is being rendered. What's particularly powerful about Justice appearing in this position is that it confirms this isn't about your feelings or their feelings. This isn't about who can tell a better story or who has more sympathy. This is about objective truth, about cause and effect, about the law that governs energy and action. In practical terms, what this looks like is their carefully constructed image starting to crack and crumble. The reputation they built, the persona they maintained, the story they told about who they are versus who you are, all of it is being exposed for the performance it always was. Maybe people are starting to see through their act, starting to notice inconsistencies in their stories, starting to question why someone who presents as so enlightened or moral treats people the way they do. Maybe their own actions are catching up with them in concrete ways. Legal issues, professional consequences, relationships falling apart, situations where they can't talk their way out or intellectualize their way through. Justice brings real-world consequences, not just spiritual lessons. The emotional reality of justice is that truth always surfaces. Deception always collapses under its own weight eventually. For this person, that means facing the mirror, seeing themselves as they truly are rather than as they've convinced themselves they are. The psychological shift happening is profound because someone who has built their entire identity on being right, being superior, being the one who sees clearly while others stumble in darkness, is now being confronted with evidence of their own blindness, their own cruelty, their own profound wrongness. That's not a comfortable place to be. and for someone who judged you so harshly for your perceived failings, having to face their own is particularly devastating. What justice wants you to understand is that you don't have to do anything. You don't have to seek revenge or wish ill on this person or even think about them at all. The universal law handles this. The balance restores itself, and what you're witnessing now is that restoration in action. The next card that emerged is Strength, and this one made me pause because it's showing me something really important about what's happening beneath the surface of this person's life. We see the image of a woman gently closing the mouth of a lion, not through force, but through calm presence, through inner power, through the kind of strength that doesn't need to dominate or control. The white robe she wears symbolizes purity. The infinity symbol above her head represents infinite possibility and spiritual connection, and the flowers that crown both her and the lion speak to gentleness and natural growth. Here's what's fascinating about Strength appearing in this reading about someone's karmic reckoning. This card is revealing that what's breaking this person down, what's bringing them to their knees, isn't external force or obvious punishment. It's the quiet, persistent truth that they can no longer escape. It's the gentle but relentless pressure of their own conscience, their own knowing, their own inability to maintain the lies they've told themselves. The lion represents raw animal instinct, ego, the primal self, and this person has spent so much energy trying to tame and control their inner beast, trying to present this civilized, intellectual, superior version of themselves while their inner world was chaotic and wounded. What I'm picking up is that the strength they pretended to have, the confidence they projected, the power they wielded over you, all of it was actually compensation for feeling weak, for feeling out of control, for feeling afraid. People who are truly strong don't need to constantly prove their strength, don't need to make others feel small to feel big themselves, don't need to judge and criticize and tear down. This person's behavior toward you came from a place of inner fragility that they refused to acknowledge. They needed you to be wrong so they could feel right, needed you to be flawed so they could feel perfect, needed you to be weak so they could feel strong. Now, what's happening in their home is that all those inner demons they've been running from, all those aspects of themselves they've been projecting onto others, all that shadow material they refuse to integrate, it's all catching up. The strength this card speaks of is the kind that comes from facing your darkness, from admitting your faults, from doing the real inner work of transformation. This person is being forced into that work whether they want to do it or not. Their home has become a mirror they can't avoid, reflecting back every truth they've denied, every wound they've ignored, every part of themselves they've rejected. In real-world terms, this might look like their relationships within their home falling apart because the people closest to them are no longer willing to enable the false self they present. Maybe their partner is finally seeing through the mask. Their children are pulling away. Their family dynamics are imploding because the foundation was built on pretense rather than authenticity. Maybe they're experiencing health issues, anxiety, depression, insomnia, physical manifestations of the internal turmoil they can no longer suppress. The body keeps the score, and when we refuse to deal with our emotional and spiritual issues, they eventually manifest physically. The psychological insight here is profound. This person is discovering that you can't selectively numb, can't compartmentalize indefinitely, can't maintain a false self without eventually fracturing. The energy required to keep up appearances, to maintain the lie, to suppress the truth is exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. The gentle hand of strength is forcing them to look at what they've been avoiding, to feel what they've been denying, to acknowledge what they've been projecting. This is karmic mercy disguised as difficulty, because the only path to real healing, real growth, real redemption is through radical honesty with oneself. What the cards are emphasizing is that true strength isn't about dominating others or maintaining control or never showing vulnerability. It's about having the courage to face yourself completely, to integrate your shadow, to acknowledge your humanity with all its flaws and failures. The Page of Wands comes next, and this card brings an interesting energy to the reading. I'm seeing this young messenger, eager and full of enthusiasm, holding a wand and gazing at it with curiosity and wonder. The page wears bright, adventurous clothing, stands in a desert landscape suggesting new territory, and there's this sense of someone at the beginning of something, someone with news to deliver or discoveries to make. The salamanders on the tunic represent transformation through fire, the ability to survive and even thrive in intense conditions. What I'm interpreting from the Page of Wands in this context is that this karmic situation is bringing new information to light, revealing things that were hidden, exposing secrets that were carefully guarded. Pages are messengers, and this Page of Wands specifically carries messages about action, about passion, about things that were done impulsively or recklessly. The energy I'm picking up is that truths are coming out, conversations are happening, discoveries are being made that fundamentally change the narrative this person has been controlling. Think about how this person operated in your life. They controlled information, controlled the story, controlled how things were perceived and interpreted. They were the author of the narrative, and they cast you as the villain while they played the hero or the victim or the wise one. Now, the Page of Wands is suggesting that new information is disrupting that controlled narrative. Maybe someone is speaking up who previously stayed silent. Maybe evidence is emerging that contradicts their version of events. Maybe their own words and actions from the past are being examined in a new light. In practical manifestation, this could look like text messages or emails being discovered, conversations being overheard, witnesses coming forward, patterns being recognized that were previously overlooked. The Page of Wands brings things into the open, shines light on what was in shadow, and in a situation involving a hypocrite. That exposure is devastating because hypocrisy only works in darkness, only functions when different audiences don't compare notes, only survives when information is compartmentalized. When everything comes to light, when all the different versions of the story are laid side by side, the contradictions become impossible to ignore. The emotional landscape this creates for the hypocritical person is one of panic and defensiveness. They're scrambling to control damage, to explain away inconsistencies, to maintain their image as their foundation crumbles. They're experiencing the terror of being truly seen, not as they wish to be perceived, but as they actually are. For someone who has invested so much in the false self, in the carefully crafted persona, this kind of exposure feels like death, like annihilation, because in a sense it is. The version of themselves they've been presenting is dying, being revealed as the construct it always was. The psychological insight here is that secrets require energy to maintain, lies demand constant vigilance, and false personas are exhausting to uphold. This person has been living multiple lives, showing different faces to different people, saying one thing and doing another, presenting as one kind of person while behaving as another. The Page of Wands is indicating that this fragmented existence is collapsing, that the walls between compartments are breaking down, that everything they've worked to keep separate is merging into one undeniable truth. What the universe wants you to know through this card is that the truth you've known all along, the reality you saw but maybe were gaslit into doubting, is being validated. The things they accused you of, the character defects they attributed to you, the ways they painted you as unreasonable or crazy or problematic, all of that is being revealed as projection, as deflection, as the tactics of someone desperate to avoid looking at their own shadow. Moving to the Five of Swords and Taurus, when this card appeared, I felt this wave of recognition because it's showing me the exact energy of what this person did to you and what's now boomeranging back to them. The scene shows a figure holding 3 swords with a smirk on his face, looking at 2 other figures walking away with slumped shoulders, defeated. 2 more swords lie on the ground. The sky is turbulent, cloudy, suggesting that even in victory there's no peace, no real triumph. The figure who appears to have won is actually standing alone in a barren landscape, holding onto weapons that ultimately bring no satisfaction. This is the card of hollow victory, of winning battles while losing what actually matters, of destroying relationships in the pursuit of being right. What I'm picking up is that this card represents how this person operated in conflict with you and others. They fought dirty. They fought to win at any cost. They cared more about being right than about truth, more about dominating than about understanding, more about your defeat than any actual resolution. They collected their wins like trophies, those moments where they successfully made you feel stupid or wrong or small, where they got the last word, where they proved their point even if it meant twisting reality to do so. The Five of Swords shows someone who values victory over connection, who would rather be alone and right than in relationship and humble. This person sacrificed authentic connection, real intimacy, genuine friendship, meaningful relationship on the altar of their ego. They pushed away anyone who challenged them, who saw through them, who refused to play the role they assigned. And now what's happening in their home is that they're experiencing the natural consequence of this approach. They're alone, isolated, surrounded by the weapons they used against others, but finding no comfort in them, no peace, no sense of real triumph. In real-life scenarios, this manifests as someone who realizes they've burned bridges they can't rebuild, who has pushed away everyone who actually cared about them, who has collected hollow victories while losing everything of substance. Maybe they're looking around their home and seeing the emptiness they've created, the silence, the absence of genuine warmth or connection or love. Maybe they're reaching out to people only to find doors closed, calls unreturned, olive branches rejected because they've used up all their chances, exhausted all goodwill, proven themselves untrustworthy one too many times. The emotional and psychological reality is brutal. They're experiencing loneliness, not as a temporary state, but as a consequence of their choices, as the natural result of how they've treated people. They're understanding, perhaps for the first time, that you can win every argument and still lose everything that matters, that you can be right in your own mind and still be profoundly wrong in your heart, that intelligence without wisdom, words without compassion, victory without integrity creates a life that looks successful on the outside but feels empty on the inside. What's particularly karmic about this card appearing here is that the pain they're experiencing is the exact pain they inflicted on you. They made you feel defeated, made you feel like no matter what you said or did, you'd never be good enough, never measure up, never win against their superior logic or perspective. They enjoyed watching you walk away defeated, shoulders slumped, spirit broken. Now they're the ones experiencing defeat, not at the hands of another person, but at the hands of reality itself, of natural law, of cause and effect. The universe is teaching them what it feels like to be on the receiving end of the energy they so freely gave out. The guidance here is that this situation is resolving itself without your involvement, without your energy, without your attention. This person's karmic lesson is about facing the emptiness they created, sitting with the loneliness that results from treating people as opponents rather than companions. The Emperor appears next, and this card brings a different energy to the reading, one that speaks to structure, authority, and the crumbling of false kingdoms. In the imagery, we see a figure seated on a throne adorned with ram heads, holding an ankh in one hand and an orb in the other, representing both life and dominion. Mountains rise behind him, solid and immovable, suggesting the foundations upon which empires are built. His armor beneath his red robes tells us he's prepared for battle, always ready to defend his territory, his rules, his authority. What I'm sensing with the Emperor in this reading is that this hypocritical person built their life like an empire, with themselves as the ultimate authority, the ruler whose word was law, whose decisions were unquestionable, whose perspective was the only valid one. They structured their entire world to maintain their position of power, their sense of control, their ability to dictate terms and conditions for everyone around them. In your relationship with them, they were the one who set the rules, often rules that applied to you but not to them, standards they held you to, but conveniently didn't have to meet themselves. The Emperor energy gone toxic is authoritarian rather than authoritative, controlling rather than leading, rigid rather than structured. This person used their position, whether in family, in social circles, in professional settings, to dominate rather than guide, to demand rather than inspire, to force compliance rather than earn respect. They believed their way was the only way, their perspective was objective truth, their judgments were final. They built walls around themselves, fortifications that kept out anything that might challenge their worldview, anyone who might question their authority. Now, what's happening as part of this karmic reckoning is that their empire is crumbling, their authority is being challenged or stripped away, their carefully constructed systems of control are breaking down. The emperor, reversed or afflicted, speaks to the collapse of false power structures, the dissolution of rigid systems that were built on ego rather than wisdom. From what I'm interpreting, this person is losing their grip on control, finding that the people they once commanded no longer jump at their orders, that the structure they built is collapsing because it was never built on solid ground. It was built on fear, manipulation, and the compliance of others. In practical terms, maybe they're losing their position at work, experiencing a demotion or forced retirement that strips away the title they use to validate their sense of importance. Maybe in their home, the family members who once deferred to them are now standing up, setting boundaries, refusing to accept the unacceptable. Maybe their health is failing in ways that make physical control impossible, forcing them to depend on others, to acknowledge vulnerability, to release the iron grip they've maintained. The emperor's fall is often dramatic because it represents the dismantling of identity itself for someone who has built their entire sense of self on being in control, being in charge, being the authority. The psychological impact of losing emperor energy is profound disorientation and fear. For someone who has structured their entire world around maintaining power and control, finding themselves powerless is terrifying. They don't know who they are without their throne, without their title, without their ability to dictate and dominate. They're being forced to confront the difference between authentic leadership earned through wisdom and respect, and authoritarian control enforced through fear and manipulation. They're learning that real power is internal and can't be taken away, while false power is external and crumbles the moment circumstances change. What this card is revealing is that part of their karmic lesson involves losing everything they used to prove their worth, everything they used to feel superior, everything they used to elevate themselves above others. The throne is being dismantled piece by piece, and they're having to face who they are without the trappings of power, without the structure that propped up their ego, without the control that let them avoid their own inner work. This is humbling in the most absolute sense, a complete ego death that, while painful, is necessary for any real transformation to occur. The guidance the Emperor offers is that true authority comes from self-mastery, not mastery over others. And this person is being taught that distinction through lived experience. The Knight of Wands charges into the reading now, and the energy shifts dramatically. This is a card of swift action, impulsive movement, passionate pursuit, often without thinking through consequences. The knight sits on a rearing horse full of enthusiasm and confidence, wearing armor decorated with salamanders, ready to charge into battle or adventure. The desert landscape behind him suggests he's moving quickly through barren territory, creating dust and disturbance with his passage. What's really interesting about the Knight of Wands appearing in this reading is that it's revealing something about how their karma is manifesting, the speed and intensity of it. From what I'm picking up, things are happening quickly in their life, situations are escalating rapidly, and they're finding themselves reacting impulsively, making rash decisions, taking action without thinking things through, which only makes their situation worse. The Knight of Wands in this context represents the frenetic energy of someone in crisis mode, someone who's lost their center and is now just reacting, just trying to control damage, just attempting to fight their way out of a situation that requires stillness and reflection rather than action and aggression. This card is also showing me how this person has always operated. They were impulsive in their judgments of you, quick to anger, fast to criticize, ready to charge into conflict without considering the cost. They acted first and thought later, if at all, driven by ego and emotion disguised as logic and righteousness. The Knight of Wands energy is passionate but can be destructive when not tempered by wisdom, and this person never learned that tempering, never developed that wisdom. They just charged through life and relationships, leaving scorched earth behind them, calling it strength when it was actually recklessness. Now, in their home, in their personal life, this impulsive energy is working against them. Maybe they're making hasty decisions that backfire, taking actions that seem like solutions but actually create more problems, saying things in anger that can't be unsaid, burning bridges that connected them to support or love or understanding. The Knight of Wands can represent self-sabotage when its energy is ungrounded, and that's exactly what's happening. This person is their own worst enemy right now, creating or accelerating their own downfall through impulsive reactions and poorly thought out responses to their crumbling world. In real life, this might look like explosive arguments that permanently damage relationships, impulsive financial decisions that worsen their situation, aggressive confrontations that expose their true nature to people who previously gave them the benefit of the doubt, or hasty attempts to regain control that only highlight how out of control they actually are. The Knight of Wands energy is loud and visible, so their crisis isn't quiet or private, it's on display, it's creating spectacle. It's impossible for others to ignore or excuse. The emotional and psychological state revealed here is one of desperation masked as confidence, panic dressed up as decisiveness, fear driving action that appears bold but is actually self-destructive. They're flailing, thrashing, trying to fight their way out of a situation that can't be fought, only surrendered to, only learned from. But surrender isn't in the Knight of Wands vocabulary, and it certainly isn't in this person's nature, so they keep charging forward, keep taking action, keep trying to muscle through when what they actually need is to stop, reflect, feel, and face what they've been running from their entire life. What the universe is showing you through this card is that sometimes karma manifests not through external punishment, but through internal chaos, through someone's own nature turning against them, through their default patterns becoming the very thing that destroys them. This person is experiencing the consequences of never learning self-control, never developing emotional regulation, never pausing to consider the impact of their actions before taking them. They're reaping exactly what they've sown, and the harvest is bitter. The Three of Swords pierces through the reading now, and Taurus, this card needs no interpretation for its basic meaning because the imagery is so clear, so visceral. Three swords pierce a heart suspended in a gray, rainy sky. There's no escaping the message: heartbreak, betrayal, painful truth, sorrow that cuts deep. The rain represents tears, the gray sky represents the bleakness of this emotional state, and the three swords represent the multiple ways pain can penetrate our defenses, our heart, our sense of safety and trust. What I'm picking up with the Three of Swords appearing in this reading about someone's karmic reckoning is that they're experiencing genuine heartbreak now, real grief, authentic pain. And here's what's important for you to understand. This isn't about you feeling satisfaction at their suffering. This is about recognizing that pain is often the doorway to transformation. That heartbreak is sometimes what finally breaks open a closed heart. That grief can be the beginning of real change if someone is willing to do the work. This person is experiencing the heartbreak they caused you. They're feeling betrayed by life, by circumstances, by people they thought they could count on or control. They're facing painful truths about themselves, about their choices, about the impact they've had on others. The Three of Swords is showing me that their heart, which has been closed and defended and armored for so long, is finally being cracked open, and that process is excruciating. They're grieving the loss of their false self, mourning the collapse of their carefully constructed world, feeling the weight of consequences they spent years avoiding. Remember how they made you feel? The heartbreak, the betrayal, the pain of being judged and found wanting by someone you cared about or trusted or wanted connection with? The Three of Swords is reflecting that exact energy back to them now. They're the ones feeling betrayed, not by you, but by life itself, by reality, by the mirror that's finally showing them truth they can't deny. They're the ones whose heart is breaking as they watch their world fall apart, as they face rejection or abandonment from people they took for granted, as they realize the depth of what they've lost and damaged and destroyed. In practical manifestation, this might be the actual ending of significant relationships, a divorce, children going no contact, friends cutting ties, family members setting permanent boundaries. The Three of Swords represents real loss, concrete endings, the kind of pain that can't be rationalized away or intellectualized or explained as someone else's problem. This is pain they have to feel, grief they have to move through, heartbreak they have to acknowledge. The emotional and psychological landscape is raw and overwhelming. For someone who has spent their life avoiding vulnerability, who has used their intellect and judgment as shields against feeling, who has projected their pain onto others rather than dealing with it themselves, actually feeling heartbreak without defense mechanisms is devastating. The Three of Swords is breaking through every wall they've built, every defense they've erected, every strategy they've used to avoid their own heart. They're being forced to feel, and for someone who has been cut off from their emotional truth for so long, the intensity is almost unbearable. What's particularly karmic about this card is that heartbreak has the potential to be transformative if someone is willing to let it break them open rather than make them more closed, more bitter, more hardened. The Three of Swords offers an opportunity for genuine emotional healing, for developing empathy and compassion through personal suffering, for understanding through experience what they've put others through. Whether this person takes that opportunity or not isn't your concern, but the opportunity is being presented through this painful chapter of their life. The wisdom here is that pain is a great teacher if we're willing to be students, that heartbreak can soften a heart that nothing else could reach, that sometimes we don't understand the impact of our actions until we experience similar consequences ourselves. The Eight of Cups appears, and when I pulled this card, I felt this profound sense of walking away, of leaving behind what no longer serves, of searching for something more meaningful than what's been found so far. The figure in the card is walking away from 8 carefully stacked cups, turning their back on what they've built or accumulated, moving toward mountains in the distance under a moon that's both full and eclipsed. There's something deeply spiritual and soul-searching about this card, a recognition that material or external success means nothing if internal peace is absent. What I'm interpreting from the Eight of Cups in this context is that the people in this person's life are walking away. But more than that, this person is being forced to walk away from their old identity, their old way of being, everything they thought defined them. The cups represent emotional investments, relationships, the structures of life, and the figure walking away shows the necessity of leaving these behind when they no longer align with truth or growth or genuine connection. From what I'm picking up, this person is experiencing a profound sense of emptiness, despite whatever external success or achievements they've accumulated. They've built their 8 cups, they've created their life, they've accomplished things they thought would bring satisfaction, but they're discovering that none of it means anything without authentic connection, without real love, without genuine self-knowledge. The Eight of Cups is a crisis of meaning, a dark night of the soul, a recognition that they've been climbing the wrong mountain, pursuing the wrong goals, living the wrong life. In practical terms, this manifests as depression, existential despair, a sense of futility about everything they've done and built. Maybe they're looking at their accomplishments and feeling nothing, looking at their possessions and seeing only emptiness, looking at their life and wondering what it was all for. The Eight of Cups often appears when someone realizes they've been living someone else's version of success, following someone else's script, performing a role rather than living authentically. For this person, that realization is crushing because they've invested so much in the performance, in the image, in the external presentation of having it all together. The solitary journey shown in the Eight of Cups is particularly significant for someone who has spent their life judging others, positioning themselves as superior, maintaining control through criticism and intellectual dominance. They're now experiencing profound loneliness, the kind that comes from realizing you've kept everyone at a distance, that you've never truly let anyone in, that you've been so busy protecting your false self that you never developed a real self worth knowing. The figure in the card walks alone, not because there's nobility in solitude, but because there's no one left to walk with, because bridges have been burned, because connection has been sacrificed for ego. The emotional landscape is one of grief, disillusionment, and the painful recognition that change is necessary but terrifying. They're facing the reality that everything they've done, everything they've been, everything they've worked to maintain has been hollow, has been performance, has been in service of protecting themselves from the very vulnerability that makes life worth living. The psychological insight is that you can't outrun yourself, can't escape your own need for authenticity and meaning through achievement or control or superiority. At some point, the soul demands truth, demands depth, demands reality, and the Eight of Cups represents that soul's insistence that things must change. What's karmic about this card is that the walking away energy they imposed on others through their behavior, the way they made people want to distance themselves, the isolation they created through their judgment and criticism is now their own experience. They're the one walking away from everything they knew, everything they built, everything they thought mattered, not because they want to, but because they have to, because staying would mean dying spiritually, emotionally, psychologically. The journey into the unknown that the Eight of Cups represents is terrifying but necessary, and they're being forced to take it. The guidance here is that this represents the possibility of real change, genuine transformation, authentic rebirth. The Eight of Cups is painful, but it's also hopeful because it shows someone finally willing to search for truth, for meaning, for something real beyond the surface appearances they've maintained for so long. Finally, we arrive at Judgment and Taurus. When this card revealed itself as the final card in this reading, I felt the completion of the cycle, the fullness of the karmic story, the absolute certainty of divine timing and universal justice. The imagery is powerful and unmistakable. An angel blowing a trumpet, calling the dead to rise from their graves, figures emerging with arms raised, being called to account, being summoned to reckoning. This is resurrection, revelation, final judgment, the moment when all masks fall away and truth stands naked in the light. Judgment, as the culmination of this reading about karmic punishment happening in someone's home, is absolutely perfect, because this card represents the moment of absolute clarity, of unavoidable truth, of cosmic reckoning. This isn't just consequences. This isn't just cause and effect playing out. This is divine judgment, the universe itself rendering a verdict, the higher powers that govern spiritual law making their decision known. The angel's trumpet call cannot be ignored, cannot be rationalized away, cannot be escaped. When judgment appears, you are called to account, period. What I'm picking up is that this person is experiencing their judgment moment right now, in their home, in their personal life, in the private spaces where they thought they could hide from consequence, from truth, from accountability. The call is sounding, and they're being forced to rise from the grave of their false self, to emerge from the coffin of their lies and pretenses and carefully maintained image. They're being seen completely, judged accurately, and found wanting, not by you, not by any human authority, but by the universe itself, by the law of karma, by the divine order that ultimately governs all things. Judgment in this position is telling you that what you're witnessing is final, is complete, is the end of a cycle and the beginning of consequences that will shape the rest of this person's life. The hypocrite who made you live through hell, who cursed you, who positioned themselves as righteous while behaving cruelly, is now standing before the cosmic judge, and that judge has no patience for pretense, no tolerance for lies, no sympathy for those who harmed others while claiming superiority. The verdict is being rendered, and it's not in their favor. In real-world terms, this manifests as complete exposure, total collapse of false image, absolute loss of everything they use to hide behind or elevate themselves with. Judgment is thorough and final. This isn't a temporary setback they'll recover from with the right strategy or explanation. This is a fundamental shift in their reality, a permanent change in their circumstances, a definitive end to the life they knew, and the beginning of consequences they'll carry forward. Maybe legal judgments, professional rulings, social condemnation, family rejection, health crises, financial ruin, or most likely, some combination of these things all happening at once, creating a perfect storm of accountability. The emotional and psychological impact of judgment is complete ego dissolution. This person is being stripped of every defense, every excuse, every rationalization. They're standing naked before truth, And truth is not kind to hypocrites, to those who judged others while being far worse themselves, to those who created hell for others while claiming moral superiority. The angel's call is waking them up to the reality of what they've done, who they've been, the harm they've caused, and that awakening is brutal, uncompromising, absolute. What's most powerful about judgment appearing as the final card is that it represents not just punishment, but also the possibility of resurrection, of transformation, of becoming something new after the old self has been completely destroyed. But that resurrection only comes after complete surrender, after total honesty, after genuine remorse and real accountability. This person is being given an opportunity to be reborn, but first they must die to everything they've been, everything they've pretended to be, every illusion they've maintained. Whether they take that opportunity or resist it until their last breath isn't your concern, but the opportunity exists within the pain, within the judgment, within the complete dismantling of their old life. The wisdom judgment offers you is profound and freeing. You never have to seek revenge, never have to wish harm, never have to plot or plan or hope for someone's downfall, because the universe handles it. Karma is real, divine timing is perfect, and judgment comes for everyone who causes harm, especially those who do so while claiming righteousness. What you're witnessing is the proof that you can release, let go, move on, focus on your own healing and growth, and trust that balance will be restored, justice will be served, truth will prevail. The hypocrite who tormented you is facing their judgment day in their own home, in the place they thought was their sanctuary, and that judgment is thorough, complete, and absolutely deserved. Taurus, as I close this reading, I want you to really take in what these cards have shown. This isn't about celebrating someone's suffering or feeling vindicated in a petty way. This is about understanding that the universe is just, that karma is real, that people do face consequences for their actions, even if it takes time, even if it happens privately, even if you never see it directly. The person who made you question yourself, who treated you cruelly while claiming moral superiority, who cursed you and created hell in your life, they are experiencing their own hell now, in their home, in their private world, where they can't perform for an audience or maintain their false image. The 10 cards we explored today tell a complete story of karmic justice, from the King of Swords showing who this person was, to justice confirming that balance is being restored, through strength revealing their inner weakness, the Page of Wands bringing exposure, the Five of Swords showing their isolation, the Emperor revealing their crumbling authority, the Knight of Wands displaying their self-destructive actions, the Three of Swords piercing their defended heart, the Eight of Cups showing their existential crisis, and finally Judgment delivering the complete and final reckoning. This is a thorough and comprehensive accounting of how karma works, how it manifests, how it teaches through experience what words could never convey. Your job now is to release this completely, to let go of any remaining attachment to their journey, their pain, their lessons. This is between them and the universe, between them and their own soul, between them and divine justice. Your role is to focus on your healing, your growth, your life, your peace. The universe has handled what needed handling, and you are free to move forward knowing that truth always wins, that justice always comes, that karma is perfect in its timing and thorough in its delivery. Take what resonates from this reading, leave what doesn't, and remember this is for entertainment purposes and shouldn't replace professional advice. But trust that what you've been sensing, what you've been knowing, what you've been hoping would be seen and addressed has been. The hypocrite is facing their judgment day, and you can close this chapter and walk forward into your own resurrection, your own healing, your own beautiful future.